Well, well, well. Look who saw it coming. Not guessed, not hoped, not wished for it in the dark. Saw it coming. Down to the hour, down to the move, down to the exact face that cracked first, and it was not yours. If this script speaks to you, this book was written for you. The Joker Doctrine, the art of the last laugh. They laughed first. You'll laugh last. This book is the manual for everyone who was counted out, written off, and quietly building while the room wasn't watching. Not a self-help book. Not a motivational read. A strategy. Cold. Precise. Yours. You told them. You laid it out with cold precision, with surgical detail, with the kind of calm that only comes from someone who has already watched this film before in their own mind. And they laughed. They dismissed it. They called you paranoid, called you obsessive, called you dangerous for knowing too much about people who had already decided to know nothing about you. But here you are. And here it is. The reality you scripted playing out in front of everyone who doubted you, unfolding exactly the way you said it would, hitting every mark you circled, arriving on the exact timeline you predicted. Not approximately, not close, precisely, surgically, hauntingly. So go ahead and let them freak out. Let them scramble. Let them look at each other with that hollow, wide-eyed panic of people who suddenly realize the person they thought was behind them was always ahead, was always watching, was always already 3 moves into the endgame while they were still arguing about the opening. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when a certain kind of mind has been forced by circumstance, by survival, by years of being underestimated, to become something they never accounted for. A reader of patterns, a cartographer of intentions, a person who predicted the storm not because they are strange, but because they built themselves inside one. Let's talk about what actually happened here, because the version they're telling each other right now is already being quietly revised. They're softening the edges of their own disbelief. They're retroactively pretending they saw hints of it too. They're rewriting their own memory in real time, because the alternative, admitting you called it perfectly, is something their ego literally cannot process without fracturing. You remember the moment you said it. You remember the room, the silence, the way the air changed when the words left your mouth. You laid out the sequence. You named the players. You described the exact mechanism of collapse, who would break first, which alliance would dissolve, which promise would turn hollow, which person's smile would disappear the moment the leverage shifted. And they looked at you like you were unraveling. They called it a spiral. They called it projection. Some of them, the more sophisticated ones, called it catastrophizing, because they had just enough psychological vocabulary to weaponize against you and not enough self-awareness to recognize they were the catastrophe. They labeled your foresight as a disorder. They pathologized your clarity. They tried to make your precision into your pathology. But your prediction wasn't born from fear. It wasn't born from paranoia, or obsession, or instability. It was born from something far more threatening to comfortable people. Pattern recognition, sharpened by experience, by exposure, by years of watching certain kinds of people operate, by understanding that behavior is not random, it is consistent, it is logical, and if you study it without flinching, it becomes predictable. Almost embarrassingly so. And now the embarrassment is theirs. Because reality didn't just confirm your prediction, it followed your script. And there is a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when the person everyone dismissed turns out to have been the only one who actually understood what was happening. You know that silence. You're living in it right now. Let it breathe. Here is what they never understood about you. And this matters because if you don't understand it yourself, you'll keep apologizing for it. Your ability to predict did not come from a gift handed to you cleanly. It came from necessity, from being placed in environments where reading people incorrectly had consequences, real ones, not social awkwardness, not bruised feelings consequences. And so you learned. You learned fast. You learned deep. You started noticing the things people do before they do the thing they're about to do. You started tracking the small betrayals that always precede the larger ones. You noticed that people who are about to disappoint you begin distancing themselves incrementally. The replies slow down. The warmth cools by 2 degrees. The eye contact shortens weeks, sometimes months before the actual break. Most people call these things imperceptible. You perceive them. You started recognizing the architecture of manipulation not because you are manipulative, but because you have been manipulated, and you studied it the way someone studies a lock after being locked in. You mapped the patterns, you cataloged the signatures, you built a library of behavioral tells that other people walk past every single day without ever reading, and the library kept growing. And your predictions kept landing. They called you calculating, as if calculation is a flaw, as if being the person in the room who actually thinks several steps ahead is something to be ashamed of. They were annoyed by it because it made them feel transparent. And they were right to feel transparent because they were, not to everyone, but to you. And that distinction, that gap between how they appeared to the world and how they appeared to you, is what made them uncomfortable in your presence long before they could articulate why. They sensed that you knew, not what you knew specifically, but that your level of knowing exceeded theirs, that your read of the room was deeper than theirs, that you were operating on a frequency they could hear but not decode. And people who cannot decode what they can hear become afraid of the signal. And afraid people do predictable things, which is exactly how you predicted what came next. You set it down to the hour. Let that land. Not the week, not the general vicinity of a timeline, you said the hour. You describe the sequence of events with the kind of specificity that people only produce when they are either guessing recklessly or understanding completely, and it wasn't reckless. There was no chaos in your voice when you said it. There was something far more unsettling to them. Calm. The calm of someone who has already processed the outcome and made their peace with it. That calm is what haunted them more than the prediction itself, because panic looks familiar to them. Anxiety looks familiar, but the kind of quiet that comes from someone who has already fully reckoned with an uncomfortable truth that looks foreign. It looks cold. It looks like control. And the people who were planning to use chaos against you suddenly realized that chaos was not a weapon they could deploy against someone who had already mapped the terrain of that chaos and built a shelter inside it. The hour came, and with it came everything you said would come, not in outline form, not in rough approximation, but in the precise order you described, with the precise faces you named, unfolding at the precise pace you modeled. Reality did not rhyme with your prediction. Reality plagiarized it, word for word, beat for beat. And somewhere in the middle of it all, someone looked at someone else and said the words they had been quietly holding since the moment you first spoke. They were right. 3 words, small words, but the weight of them is geological. Because they were right does not just confirm your accuracy, it dismantles the narrative they built around you. Every time they called you paranoid, every time they exchanged that look across the table when you spoke, every time someone subtly positioned you as the unstable one in the room, all of it collapses under 3 words, and the rubble lands on them, not on you. You already left the building. And what are they left with now? They are left with the specific discomfort of people who owe an acknowledgement they will never deliver. They are left with the knowledge that they dismissed the most accurate voice in the room and elevated the least reliable ones. They are left running mental simulations of how different things would have looked if they had listened. They are not sleeping well right now, and you didn't have to do a single thing to make that happen. You just had to be right, and you were. Here is where it gets interesting. After you made the prediction, after they pushed back, after the conversation closed, with their dismissal still hanging in the air, you went quiet. You stopped pressing the point. You stopped trying to convince anyone. You pulled back from the debate with a stillness that they read as defeat. They assumed your silence was surrender. They assumed you had accepted their version of reality. They were wrong in a way that would later become expensive for them. Your silence was not surrender. Your silence was strategy, not the cold, mechanical kind, but the natural strategy of someone who understands that truth does not require your advocacy. Truth is not dependent on your performance of it. Truth does not need you to argue for it loudly in rooms full of people who are not ready to hear it. Truth simply needs time, and you had it, and so you waited. Not anxiously, not bitterly, with the particular patience of someone who knows the calendar is on their side. While you were silent, they were busy. They were busy building structures on foundations you had already identified as unstable. They were busy forming alliances with people you had already flagged as transient. They were busy optimizing for a version of events that you had already watched dissolve in your own projection of the future. They were, in the most precise sense of the phrase, preparing for a reality that was no longer coming, and you let them. Because preparation for a false future is its own punishment. The silence also did something else, something they didn't anticipate. It gave them the illusion of having won. And winning, to people who need to feel in control, is sedating. It made them comfortable. It made them slow. It made them stop watching you with the focused anxiety they should have maintained. They relaxed into their certainty that you had been neutralized, that the threat had passed, that the prediction had failed. And comfort is the most dangerous state for someone standing on a fault line. So when the ground shifted, and it shifted exactly when and how you said it would, they had no preparation, no contingency, no plan B. Because plan B requires acknowledging that plan A might fail, and plan A was built on the belief that you were wrong. They bet everything on your wrongness, and now they are collecting on that bet, in the wrong direction. Let's examine what is happening inside them right now, because this is important, not for revenge. You are well past revenge, but for understanding what you are dealing with. Understanding why the panic you're watching is not proportionate to the event itself. It is not just about the prediction coming true. It is about what the prediction coming true means about everything they believed regarding you. Their panic has layers. The first layer is practical reality, shifted in a way they didn't prepare for, and now they have to respond to circumstances they dismissed as impossible. That's manageable for most people. What is not manageable is the second layer. The realization that their dismissal of you was not skepticism, it was arrogance. And arrogance that has been publicly refuted by events does not dissolve quietly. It festers. It turns inward. It starts generating questions they desperately do not want to ask themselves. The question underneath all of it, the one they're circling but not landing on, is this. If they were so wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? Because your prediction was not an isolated incident. It was a data point in a longer series. And if that data point is confirmed, then the entire series has to be reevaluated. Every time they trusted their instincts over yours. Every time they elevated someone else's read over your read. Every time they made you feel like the outlier in the room. All of it is now under review. And here is what makes their panic truly spectacular. They cannot come to you. They cannot come to the person whose prediction just proved correct and ask for clarity, ask for context, ask for the next data point, because doing so would require them to say the one sentence they have structurally committed to never saying, "You were right, and I was wrong." Those 6 words are not available to them right now. Maybe not ever. And so they are panicking in isolation, with no access to the only person who actually understands the system they're trapped inside. You understand it. You've understood it for a while. And the understanding gives you a different relationship to their panic than they would expect. You are not gleeful about it. Glee requires that you needed them to fail, and you never needed anything from them except honesty, which they withheld. What you feel is something closer to the particular sadness of watching a structure collapse that you tried to reinforce for years, before realizing the architect did not want it reinforced. They wanted it to look standing. There is a difference. Now let's address the ones who are not panicking, the ones who watched everything unfold from the edge of the room, who knew or at least suspected that you were right and who said nothing. Not nothing because they lacked the information, nothing because they lacked the courage, because agreeing with you publicly would have cost them something in the room, and they decided the cost was too high. These people deserve their own accounting. You know who they are. You remember the small signals, the micro expressions of agreement that vanished before they could fully form, the split second of connection when you made your case that was immediately replaced by careful neutrality. They understood you. They were tracking what you were tracking, and they turned away. Not because they believed the others over you, but because belief and behavior are different things, and their behavior was always going to follow the social current, regardless of where their private understanding landed. The interesting thing about these people, the quiet witnesses, is that they are now carrying a specific burden that the vocal dismissers are not. The dismissers can rewrite their memory. They were loudly wrong, which means they have a performance to maintain, and performance is at least absorbing. But the quiet witnesses were privately right and publicly absent, and that combination does not age well internally. The event sits in them differently. It reminds them, quietly, repeatedly, of who they chose to be in the moment of your clarity. You do not need anything from them. You do not need their belated public acknowledgement or their private apology or their careful repositioning now that the evidence is overwhelming. What they do with their own conscience is their architecture to maintain. What you carry forward is something they cannot touch, the knowledge that in the moment when it mattered, when your reading of reality was tested against everyone else's, yours was the one that held. That is not a small thing. Do not let anyone make it small. Carry it with the same quiet you carried your prediction, not as a weapon, not as a trophy, as a reference point, as a calibration tool. As the evidence you return to when the next room tries to make you doubt your own processing, when the next group of comfortable people tries to make your precision into your problem, you have timestamps now. You have a record, and the record does not lie. This is the section that matters most to your future, not the vindication. The vindication is already done, and you do not need to keep reopening it. What matters now is what this entire episode revealed about the kind of mind you are operating with, and how you should treat that mind going forward. Because the way you have been treating it, apologizing for it, softening it, translating it into language, comfortable people can digest that practice ends here. Your mind does not work in impressions. It works in systems. While the people around you were forming gut feelings and social consensus, your mind was constructing a model, a working simulation of how the pieces connect, how the pressures distribute, how the fractures propagate. You weren't reading vibes, you were reading architecture. And the difference between vibes and architecture is that architecture can be stress tested. And you stress tested the model, and the model held, and the building fell exactly where you said it would fall. This is not mystical. This is not a personality trait to be managed or softened or explained away in social situations where it makes others uncomfortable. This is a form of intelligence, pattern intelligence, systems intelligence, the kind that reads context as data rather than atmosphere. It is valuable in direct proportion to how uncomfortable it makes people who are operating without it. Their discomfort is not a signal that something is wrong with your processing. It is a signal that your processing exceeds what they were calibrated for. But here is the discipline that comes with this. You have to stay honest with it. The failure mode for a mind like yours is not inaccuracy. It is certainty that becomes untethered from evidence. The predictions work when they are built on observation. They fail when they are built on pattern matching that has drifted into assumption. You know the difference from the inside. The evidence-built predictions feel stable, structural, architectural. The assumption-built ones feel electric, urgent, almost enjoyable in their drama. Trust the architectural ones. Question the electric ones. And when you are right, especially when you are this publicly, this specifically right, do not let the rightness calcify into arrogance. Because arrogance is the specific disease that infects people who have been validated after a long period of dismissal. It is the overcompensation for years of being told your perception was the problem. Resist it. Stay curious. Stay rigorous. Stay the person who builds the model and tests it, not the person who was right once and now lectures from the conclusion. The mind that predicted this is too valuable to compromise. No one talks about the cost of this. They talk about the vindication, the reversal, the coronation moment. And those things are real, and you have earned them. But there is a cost to being consistently ahead of the room that deserves its own accounting. Because you have been paying it for years, and you deserve to name it clearly. Not to complain about it, but to understand what it has shaped in you, and why the shape is worth the price. The cost is isolation. Not the dramatic isolation of someone cast out, the subtler isolation of someone who can see further down the road than the people walking beside them. Every time you tried to warn something was coming, there was a gap between your certainty and their skepticism, between your timeline and their disbelief, between what you could already see and what they would not see until it arrived. You lived in that gap, alone, repeatedly. And the gap is its own particular kind of quiet. The cost is doubt, not yours, but others' doubt directed at you with enough consistency that it began to find cracks. There were moments when you wondered if they were right, if the pattern you were tracking was real or constructed, if your clarity was signal or noise. Those moments of induced doubt are the most expensive thing that environment extracted from you, because they were never about truth. They were about social pressure, wearing truth's clothing. And they cost you time and energy and peace that you will not recover, but can at least stop hemorrhaging. The cost is the particular exhaustion of watching, of always being the one who is tracking what others have decided not to track, of carrying the weight of a picture that others have elected not to look at fully. There is a tiredness that accumulates in the person who sees clearly in rooms full of chosen blindness. It is not the tiredness of weakness. It is the tiredness of a different kind of labor, the labor of sustained attention. In a culture that rewards comfortable inattention, you have been doing that labor for years. Acknowledge it, and then set it down. Not the ability, the burden. You were never obligated to convince anyone. You were never required to perform your knowing for people who had already decided the performance was a threat. The only obligation of your clarity is to use it accurately, to act on it wisely, and to stop apologizing for possessing it. The people who made you feel like your sight was a crime are now living inside the verdict that sight produced. Let that be the end of the apology.